He changed our anniversary dinner reservation to a table for two, for him and his colleague. I sat at the bar sipping champagne, watching him slip my bracelet onto her wrist, calling it a family heirloom. I walked over, unclasped it and smiled. "You're right. It belonged to my grandmother. Along with the house you're now evicted from." He laughed, until security arrived with her husband. I left them both with the bill and a restraining order. "Happy anniversary, darling." I wasn't supposed to be at the bar tonight. I was supposed to be seated at table 23, the best spot in the house, with a perfect view of the patio fountains and the Chicago skyline beyond the glass. But there I was, perched on a bar stool in my own restaurant, watching my husband of 8 years slide my grandmother's bracelet onto another woman's wrist. The champagne tasted bitter against my tongue as I observed them from across the room. I'd worked 16-hour days for months to bring Harvest Moon to life, my dream restaurant finally a reality. Opening night had been flawless so far. The critics were impressed, the dining room was packed, and my signature autumn squash risotto had received nothing but praise. Everything was perfect except for the table I couldn't stop staring at. "Is everything all right, chef?" Marco, my head bartender, refilled my flute with Dom Perignon, the same bottle I'd been saving for Axel and me to share tonight. "Our 8th anniversary. Just taking a breather," I lied, forcing a smile. "The kitchen has everything under control." Before we begin this journey of betrayal and sweet revenge, I want to take a moment to thank you for joining me at tonight's table. If you're hungry for more stories of women reclaiming their power when the world serves them heartbreak, consider subscribing. It's completely free and helps our community of survivors and thrivers grow stronger. Now let's. 30 minutes earlier, I'd slipped away from the controlled chaos of the kitchen to freshen up before Axel arrived. We had reservations at 8, a table for two that I'd personally arranged with a tasting menu that told the story of our relationship through food. 8 courses for 8 years. I'd even asked the pastry chef to recreate our wedding cake for dessert. My phone had dinged with a text message as I was reapplying my lipstick. "Need to change reservation to accommodate colleague. Table for two, but I'll be bringing Hazel from the campaign office. You understand? Happy anniversary, will make it up to you." I'd stared at that message for a full minute, my heart sinking as I reread those clinical words. "You understand." Did I? This wasn't the first time Axel had prioritized his budding political career over our marriage. But bringing another woman to our anniversary dinner? That was new. I'd called the maitre d' immediately. "There's been a change to my husband's reservation," I said calmly. "Please keep his table for two, but add a glass of our best champagne at the bar. That'll be for me." Now I watched as Axel laughed at something Hazel said, his hand lingering on her forearm. She was everything I wasn't, polished in that campaign-ready way, with honey blonde hair that fell in perfect waves past her shoulders. Her red dress hugged curves that my chef's coat had hidden for years. I tugged self-consciously at my black dress, the one I'd bought especially for tonight, now feeling like an afterthought in my own restaurant. 8 anniversaries. The first, we'd gone camping in Michigan, making love under the stars after a dinner of hot dogs and beans. The 5th, Paris, where Axel had surprised me with cooking classes at Le Cordon Bleu, the push I'd needed to finally pursue my culinary dreams. Last year he'd forgotten entirely, coming home at midnight with a hastily purchased gas station rose and mumbles about campaign meetings running late. I fingered the stem of my champagne flute, remembering how we used to be. Before the campaign. Before his ambitions for state senate consumed everything. Before I became a box to check on his path to political success. Supportive wife, check. Small business owner, check. All-American backstory, check. The sommelier approached their table with the wine I'd selected for us, a 2012 Barolo that we'd first tasted on our honeymoon in Italy. Axel was making a show of it, explaining the wine to Hazel as if he were the expert. I watched her lean forward, captivated by whatever story he was telling. Then the light caught something on her wrist and my entire body went cold. The bracelet. My grandmother's tennis bracelet. Delicate diamonds set in white gold, with a distinctive Art Deco clasp that couldn't be mistaken for anything else. I'd worn it on our wedding day as my something old. It had been in my family for 3 generations. I remembered the day I'd shown it to Axel, telling him about my grandmother pawning it during hard times to keep our family afloat, only to buy it back years later with her saved tips as a waitress. How she'd given it to me on her deathbed, making me promise to only share it with someone worthy of our family's resilience. Axel was gesturing animatedly now, clearly deep into some campaign anecdote. I caught fragments, family heirloom, and passed down for generations. He was telling my family story, claiming my history as part of his narrative. And Hazel was looking at that bracelet with awe, running her fingers over the diamonds that should have been on my wrist tonight. My shock crystallized into something harder, colder. This wasn't just a forgotten anniversary or a career prioritized over marriage. This was theft of my heirloom, my history, my dignity. Marco, I said quietly, never taking my eyes off their table, could you please call Harrison from security? Tell him I need assistance with a situation in about 10 minutes. Of course, chef. Is everything okay? It will be, I replied, setting down my champagne. It absolutely will be. As I slid off the stool, smoothing down my dress, I noticed another man seated at the far end of the bar. He kept glancing toward Axel's table, his expression darkening with each look. He was nursing what appeared to be his third whiskey, wedding ring glinting under the ambient lighting. Something about his discomfort resonated with mine. My mind raced as I approached the hostess stand, checking the reservation system. There it was, Hazel Montgomery. A quick social media search confirmed my suspicion. The man at the bar was Stephen Montgomery, Hazel's husband. The reservation had originally been in his name before Axel changed it. I felt a calm clarity wash over me as the pieces fell into place. The betrayal was even more calculated than I'd initially thought. This wasn't just an inappropriate work dinner. They hadn't even tried to be discreet, using their real names, coming to my restaurant on my anniversary. I took a deep breath and made my way toward their table, my chef's instincts taking over. In the kitchen, timing is everything. The perfect moment to remove a steak from heat, to add the final seasoning, to present the dish. This confrontation required the same precision. As I approached, Axel still hadn't noticed me. He was too engrossed in whatever lie he was spinning, one hand now covering Hazel's, the diamonds of my grandmother's bracelet catching the light between their intertwined fingers. 3 steps away and I finally caught his eye. For just a second, I saw panic flash across his face before he composed himself, plastering on that campaign-ready smile I'd grown to despise. Melody. There you are, he exclaimed too loudly. I was just telling Hazel about your restaurant. Join us. In that moment, looking at my husband pretending nothing was wrong while another woman wore my family's legacy on her wrist, something inside me hardened into diamond-like resolve. 8 years of compromises, of stepping back so he could step forward, of swallowing disappointment, it all ended tonight. I smiled, feeling more powerful with each step toward their table. Oh, I wouldn't miss this for the world, darling. Happy anniversary to us, indeed. Time seemed to slow as I approached their table, each step bringing me closer to a confrontation I never imagined having on what should have been one of the happiest nights of my life. My focus narrowed to the glittering diamonds encircling Hazel's wrist. Diamonds that held stories she couldn't possibly understand. The bracelet had first belonged to my great-grandmother Josephine, a wedding gift from her husband before he left for World War II. When he never returned, that bracelet became her lifeline. She sold 1 diamond at a time to feed her children during those desperate years, replacing each stone as she built a small dressmaking business from her kitchen table. By the time she passed it to my grandmother Eleanor, every diamond had been earned twice over. Mom always said that bracelet carried our family's tenacity in each stone. Diamond hard, diamond bright, she would whisper, running her fingers over the clasp. That's how Thompson women survive. I remembered sitting at my grandmother's vanity as a child, watching her fasten that bracelet before heading to her night shift. Eleanor had worked as a waitress at Callahan's Diner for 37 years. First to put my mother through college, then to help my parents when Dad's construction business faltered. The bracelet would catch the light as she poured coffee, the only luxury she allowed herself. Why don't you sell it? I once asked her during a particularly lean month when I overheard my parents discussing unpaid bills. We could get a new car. Eleanor had cupped my face in her hands, her eyes fierce despite her gentle touch. Melody Jane, some things are worth more than their price tag. This bracelet isn't just diamonds, it's every sacrifice, every triumph, every moment we chose courage over comfort. Someday when you understand what really matters, it'll be yours. I understood in 2008, when the Great Recession hit and my grandmother faced foreclosure on the small craftsman house my grandfather had built with his own hands. I was in culinary school then, barely making ends meet myself. She called me one evening, her voice strained but determined. "I'm pawning the bracelet tomorrow," she said simply. "Gran, no. There must be another way. I can drop out, get a full-time job." "This is exactly what it's for," she interrupted. "Your education matters. This house matters. The bracelet has saved this family before and it will again." For 9 months, the bracelet sat in a pawnshop while my grandmother worked double shifts despite her arthritis, while I catered events between classes, while we both pretended not to count the days until the loan would default. I still remember the afternoon we walked into that shop together, how her hands trembled as she counted out the cash, the last payment with $23 to spare. "See," she said, clasping it back onto her wrist where it belonged. "Diamond hard, diamond bright." When she died 3 years later, I was the only one at her bedside. My parents had moved to Arizona by then and my sister was stationed overseas. Eleanor slipped the bracelet from her wrist to mine with the last of her strength. "Remember what really matters," she whispered. "And only share this with someone worthy of our legacy." I thought Axel was worthy. We met when he came to the restaurant where I was sous chef, campaigning for city council. He charmed everyone, remembering names, asking thoughtful questions about the neighborhood. When he asked for my number, I surprised myself by saying yes. Our courtship was a whirlwind. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn evening much like tonight, he proposed at the lakeshore. I said yes without hesitation, certain I'd found someone who valued family and hard work as much as I did. A week before our wedding, I showed him the bracelet for the first time, telling him its history as we sat on the porch swing of my grandmother's house. "Our house now." "This is remarkable," he said, examining the antique clasp. "It must be worth a fortune." "It's priceless," I corrected him. "It's survived the depression, war, recession, everything life has thrown at the women in my family." Axel looked at me with such tenderness then. "I'll never let anything happen to it or to you." 2 days after our wedding, I found him studying the insurance appraisal. "Just being responsible," he explained. "Something this valuable needs proper protection." I believed him. I believed him about so many things. 4 years into our marriage, when Axel decided to run for state senate, our savings weren't enough for the campaign launch. We sat at our kitchen table reviewing our assets when he suggested refinancing the house. "This is my grandmother's house," I protested. "It's been paid off for years." "It's an investment in our future," he countered. "Once I'm elected, we'll pay it off again in no time." When I hesitated, his eyes fell on my wrist. "What about the bracelet?" "Just temporarily, we could get a short-term loan against it." The hurt must have shown on my face because he immediately backtracked. "I'm sorry, that was thoughtless. I know what it means to you." That night, I made the decision that seemed like trust at the time. I slipped the bracelet into his hand. "Keep it in the safe at your office," I said. "I'm afraid of something happening to it during restaurant prep, and this way it's safe but still with us." He'd kissed me deeply. "I'll guard it with my life." That was the last time I saw my grandmother's bracelet. Until tonight, gleaming on another woman's wrist, being passed off as some generous gift from my husband. As I stood before their table now, looking at Hazel's perfectly manicured fingers tracing the diamonds that represented my family's struggle and triumph, a cold clarity washed over me. The legacy of this bracelet wasn't just about maintaining a family heirloom, it was about the strength to do what needed to be done no matter how difficult. My grandmother had pawned this bracelet to save what mattered. Now it was my turn to reclaim not just the diamonds but everything they stood for. "What a beautiful piece," I said, my voice steady as I locked eyes with my husband. "Would you mind if I had a closer look?" Hazel's smile faltered as she glanced between Axel and me. "Oh, of course," she said, extending her wrist with practiced charm. "It's absolutely stunning." I gently took her hand, examining the bracelet while Axel shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The tension at the table was palpable, but I wasn't ready for the confrontation. Not yet. I needed to understand the full extent of their betrayal first. "Exquisite craftsmanship," I remarked, releasing her wrist. "Axel has excellent taste in family heirlooms." I gave him a pointed look before adding, "I should get back to the kitchen. Enjoy your meal." I walked away, feeling Axel's eyes burning into my back. Instead of returning to the kitchen, I reclaimed my spot at the bar, this time positioning myself where I could observe their table without being obvious. Marco slid a fresh glass of champagne toward me without a word. From this vantage point, I could see how Axel leaned in too close when speaking to Hazel, how her hand occasionally brushed his, how they shared glances that spoke of more than professional camaraderie. Each interaction revealed layers of intimacy that had clearly developed over time. I thought back to the first sign something was wrong in our marriage. 6 months ago, Axel had started coming home smelling of unfamiliar perfume. Campaign events, he'd explained. You shake 100 hands, hug dozens of supporters. I'd nodded, ignoring the fact that the scent was always the same. Then came the late-night strategy sessions that couldn't be interrupted. The weekend retreats with his campaign team that I wasn't invited to attend. The sudden password on his phone, for security reasons. Each oddity I'd rationalized away, making excuses for the man I thought I'd married. Refill? Marco asked, interrupting my thoughts. I shook my head. I need to stay clear-headed. 3 months ago, I'd found a receipt for a hotel downtown in his suit pocket while doing laundry. When confronted, Axel had an explanation ready. A donor meeting ran late and it didn't make sense to drive home. The hotel was 3 blocks from our house. Last month, I'd stopped by his campaign headquarters unannounced, bringing lunch for everyone. His secretary was flustered, saying he was in a meeting that couldn't be disturbed. Through the frosted glass of his office door, I could make out 2 silhouettes standing suspiciously close. Even then, I'd convinced myself it was nothing. Axel was an affectionate person. He stood close to everyone. He touched people's arms when he spoke to them. I was being paranoid, letting my insecurities get the best of me. My gaze drifted to the man at the end of the bar, Stephen Montgomery, still nursing his whiskey, still watching their table. How much did he know? Had he suspected before tonight, or was this betrayal as fresh for him as it was for me? The sommelier was clearing Axel and Hazel's appetizer plates now. They seemed to have already moved on from the awkwardness of my visit, laughing together over something private. Axel's hand disappeared beneath the table. I turned away, the ache in my chest surprising me despite everything. Chef, one of my line cooks approached, looking concerned. The Mortons are asking to speak with you about their anniversary cake. Tell them I'll be right there, I said, grateful for the distraction. As I made my rounds through the dining room, checking on guests and accepting compliments on the food, I maintained a professional smile. No one would guess that the chef owner was experiencing the most humiliating night of her life. Years in the kitchen had taught me to compartmentalize, to function through burns, cuts and kitchen disasters. This was just another kind of pain to work through. When I finished with the Mortons, I purposely took a path that led me past Axel's table. They were midway through their entrees, speaking in hushed tones. I slowed my pace just enough to catch fragments of their conversation. Once the campaign succeeds, Axel was saying. But what about her? Hazel's voice, laced with concern. She'll understand eventually. The restaurant keeps her busy. And the prenup protects most of our assets. And your house. It's in both your names, isn't it? Axel chuckled. Technically yes. But she's so sentimental about it being her grandmother's that she'll let me buy her out for far less than it's worth. My steps faltered. So this wasn't just an affair. They were planning a future together. A future that involved disposing of me like an inconvenient appliance that no longer served its purpose. I continued to the kitchen on autopilot, checking plates and directing the staff without truly seeing any of it. My mind was racing, piecing together conversations and incidents that suddenly made perfect sense. 2 weeks ago, Axel had asked me to sign documents, updating our estate planning. I'd been so busy with the restaurant opening that I'd merely skimmed them, trusting him as I always had. Had those papers been setting the stage for our separation? The bracelet wasn't just a romantic gesture to his mistress. It was a calculated move. He was already treating my family heirlooms as his own, already parceling out my legacy. I returned to the bar, needing another moment to collect myself. Stephen Montgomery had shifted closer to my seat, his expression darkening as he continued to watch Axel and Hazel. When our eyes met, I saw my own pain reflected back at me. They work together? He asked quietly, gesturing with his glass. I nodded. She's his campaign manager. Funny, he said, his voice bitter. She told me she was having dinner with a female colleague tonight. Said they needed to prepare for a donor event tomorrow. The realization that we were both being lied to exactly the same way sent a cold shiver down my spine. I'm Melody, I said, extending my hand. This is my restaurant. Stephen, he replied, his handshake firm. And apparently that's my wife with your husband. Just then Axel leaned across the table and whispered something that made Hazel laugh. She glanced around before reaching into her purse and sliding an envelope across to him. He opened it discreetly, his expression changing to one of triumph as he reviewed the contents. What are they doing? Stephen muttered. I don't know, I said, but a suspicion was forming. Excuse me. I approached the hostess stand once more, this time checking the campaign's financial records on my phone. There it was. A substantial donation from Montgomery Construction had been recorded last week. Stephen's company. Returning to the bar, I showed him the screen. Did you authorize this donation to Axel's campaign? His face drained of color. That's not possible. We're nearly bankrupt from the housing market downturn. Hazel handles our personal finances, but she knows the business can't afford political donations right now. The final piece clicked into place. This wasn't just personal betrayal. It was professional, financial, and perhaps even criminal. Hazel wasn't just sleeping with my husband. She was embezzling from her own. I watched Axel pocket the envelope, his other hand still resting possessively on Hazel's arm, his fingers brushing against my grandmother's bracelet. Stephen, I said quietly, I think we need to talk. Stephen's construction-roughened hands gripped his whiskey glass tightly. I'm listening. We moved to a quiet corner of the bar, away from curious ears. I explained what I'd seen and heard, laying out the evidence of both betrayals, personal and financial. With each detail I shared, the slump in his shoulders lessened, replaced by a straightening of his spine. She's been handling the books since the recession hit, he said, voice low with controlled anger. Said she had a degree in finance I didn't know about. Turns out there's a lot I didn't know. How much could she have taken? I asked. Enough to sink the company if this keeps up. We've got 30 families depending on Montgomery Construction for their paychecks. I watched Axel signal for dessert menus, acting like he owned the place. In a way, he did. The restaurant startup costs had come from our joint savings, which he never missed an opportunity to remind me of. I'd assumed we were building something together. Now I realized I was just another asset in his portfolio, a stepping stone on his path to political success. We need to be strategic about this, I said, an unfamiliar calm settling over me. If we confront them emotionally, they'll find a way to twist it, make us look like the irrational ones. I'm not feeling particularly rational right now, Stephen muttered. I know, neither am I. But the best revenge isn't just exposing them, it's making sure they face consequences they can't charm their way out of. My years in professional kitchens had taught me that timing and preparation were everything. We need evidence, witnesses, and the perfect moment. Harrison, my head of security, appeared at my elbow. I'd hired him away from one of Chicago's most exclusive hotels, valuing his discretion as much as his imposing presence. You needed to see me, chef? I gave him a quick overview of the situation. His expression remained professionally neutral, but his eyes darkened when I mentioned the embezzlement. So it's not just a domestic issue, he said thoughtfully. No. And I'd like to handle it without disrupting the other diners' experience if possible. Harrison nodded. I've got 2 of my team on tonight. We can position them near the table when you're ready. Just give me a signal. He hesitated. Do you want me to call the police as well? I considered this. Not yet. Let's see what evidence we can gather first. After Harrison stepped away, I turned back to Stephen. How much do you know about what they've been doing? Not enough, he admitted. But I've got access to all our company accounts on my phone. If what you're saying is true. He pulled out his device and began scrolling through financial records. Meanwhile, I stepped into the kitchen to check on service and gather my thoughts. My sous chef, Vanessa, caught my eye immediately. Everything okay, chef? You look like you're planning a murder. Just some unexpected drama with table 14, I said, forcing a smile. Can you handle the pass for another 20 minutes? Of course. He studied my face. Need backup? Maybe. I'll let you know. I returned to the bar to find Stephen staring at his phone, ashen-faced. 3 separate transfers to his campaign fund over the last month. $60,000 total. Money we don't have, disguised as materials purchases. My mind raced through the implications. Illegal campaign contributions. Financial fraud. The perfect leverage. I've got their entire conversation recorded, Stephen said, showing me his phone. Started recording when I realized who he was with. Illinois is a two-party consent state for recordings, but... He shrugged. But it's enough to confront them with, I finished. And combined with the financial records. Exactly. I checked the time. Axel and Hazel were lingering over dessert and champagne. His hand kept returning to her arm, fingers brushing against my grandmother's bracelet. The sight crystallized everything for me. In 20 minutes they'll ask for the check, I said. Axel always gets uncomfortable if dessert lasts longer than that. It's our best window. Before they've paid but after they've consumed everything. Stephen's eyes met mine, understanding dawning. So they can't just walk out. Precisely. I waved Marco over. When table 14 asks for their bill, stall. Tell them the system is processing. Give me a 3-minute warning. I excused myself to make a quick call to my lawyer, leaving a detailed voicemail about the prenuptial agreement and my concerns about the recent documents I'd signed. Then I texted my sister, asking her to send me digital copies of our grandmother's will and the house deed. Preparation had always been my strong suit. When I returned, Stephen had composed himself. I've contacted my company's attorney. He's pulling every financial record we have. If she's been embezzling, we'll find it all. Harrison approached again, standing respectfully at attention. My team is in position, he said quietly. Just give the word. I nodded, feeling an unexpected wave of gratitude for these people who barely knew me yet were ready to stand by my side. When Marco gives the signal, we move. The next few minutes stretched eternally as we finalized our approach. When Stephen and I discovered we lived only blocks apart, another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. They've been meeting at the Reed Street Motel, he said. Found charges on our credit card statement. Thought it was for business clients. 3 blocks from our house, I said, remembering Axel's hotel receipt. They weren't even trying to be careful. They thought we weren't paying attention, Stephen replied, a new resolve in his voice. They were wrong. Marco caught my eye and held up 3 fingers. The signal. Axel was asking for the check. I took a deep breath and smoothed down my dress. It's time. Want me to come with you? Stephen asked. Not initially. Let me start this. When I look back toward the bar, that's your cue. I caught my reflection in the mirrored backsplash behind the bar. For the first time since reading Axel's text, I felt fully present in my body. The hurt was still there, but it had transformed into something powerful. I wasn't just a betrayed wife or a woman scorned. I was the granddaughter of Eleanor Thompson, who had pawned her most precious possession to save what mattered, who had worked double shifts with arthritis-gnarled hands to reclaim her legacy. Diamond hard, diamond bright. Harrison fell into step slightly behind me as I began the walk across the restaurant floor. Each step felt deliberate, my path clear. The murmur of dinner conversation, the clink of silverware, the subtle notes of the playlist I'd personally selected, all of it formed the perfect backdrop for what was about to unfold. I wasn't just going to confront my husband. I wasn't just going to reclaim my bracelet. I was going to reclaim everything, my family home, my dignity, my future. Years of compromise and accommodation fell away with each step, replaced by a certainty I hadn't felt since before I met Axel. As I approached their table, I caught Hazel's eye first. Her smile faltered as she registered my expression and the large man following behind me. Axel was still studying the bill, oblivious to the approaching storm. Time to serve the final course. Enjoying dessert? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady as I stopped at their table. Axel's head snapped up, his politician's smile immediately sliding into place. Melody, come join us. The chocolate soufflé is exceptional. Your pastry chef deserves a raise. I remained standing, letting the silence stretch uncomfortably. Hazel fidgeted with her napkin, not meeting my eyes. I don't think I properly introduced myself earlier, I said to her. I'm Melody Thompson Reed, Axel's wife. Today is our 8th anniversary. Her eyes widened, darting to Axel, who laughed dismissively. Honey, I explained about the dinner change. Hazel and I have that donor meeting tomorrow and we needed to prep. His voice carried just the right note of reasonable explanation, the tone he used when convincing constituents he had their best interests at heart. I smiled. Interesting. Because the donation was made last week, according to the campaign finance records. I turned to Hazel. How's Stephen doing, by the way? Still at the bar, watching his wife and my husband celebrate our anniversary. The color drained from her face. Axel's expression hardened as he realized this wasn't going to be smoothed over with his usual charm. You're making a scene, he said quietly, his eyes flicking to nearby tables. We can discuss this at home. Actually, we can't. You see, I've been reviewing those documents you had me sign 2 weeks ago. The ones you claimed were routine estate planning. I leaned closer. Did you really think I wouldn't have my lawyer examine them once I had a moment to breathe? You tried to trick me into surrendering my grandmother's house. Hazel shifted in her seat. Axel, maybe we should. No, he snapped, then immediately softened his tone, aware of watching eyes. Melody is confused. Everything I've done has been to secure our future. Our future. I raised an eyebrow. Or yours and Hazel's? His jaw tightened. I could see him calculating his next move, weighing public perception against damage control. That's absurd, he finally said. Hazel is my campaign manager. This is a working dinner. I gently reached for Hazel's wrist, turning it so the bracelet caught the light. Then why is she wearing my grandmother's bracelet? The one you told me was in your office safe. A nearby diner glanced over, curiosity piqued. It's similar but not the same piece, Axel attempted, his confidence wavering slightly. Perhaps you've forgotten the inscription, I said, unclasping the bracelet from Hazel's wrist despite her startled protest. I turned it over, revealing the tiny engraved words on the clasp. Diamond hard, diamond bright. To Eleanor with love, 1941. Axel's expression shifted from confident to cornered. I felt a flicker of satisfaction watching him squirm. I thought it would be a nice gesture, he began, his voice low. Just for the evening. A nice gesture? I interrupted. To give away a family heirloom I specifically told you represented generations of my family's struggles? To let another woman wear my grandmother's legacy while you dined at the table I reserved for our anniversary? The whispers from nearby tables grew audible. I sensed Harrison positioning himself closer, his 2 security team members discreetly flanking the area. You're overreacting, Axel hissed, abandoning his public persona as panic set in. It's just jewelry. And there it was. Confirmation that he'd never truly understood what the bracelet symbolized, what my family's legacy meant. He'd seen it only as an expensive trinket, a potential asset to leverage. I lifted my hand, the signal for Stephen to approach. As he made his way toward us, I held the bracelet up to the light. This, I said clearly, belonged to my grandmother Eleanor Thompson, who worked 37 years as a waitress at Callahan's Diner. Who pawned it during the recession to save our family home. The same home you've been trying to remortgage without my knowledge to fund your campaign. Axel's eyes darted between me and the approaching Stephen, realization dawning. Speaking of your campaign, I continued, I wonder what the ethics committee would think of unreported donations from Montgomery Construction? Especially since Mr. Montgomery here never authorized them. Stephen reached the table, his expression cold and controlled. Hello, Hazel. Stephen, she gasped. This isn't, you don't understand. I understand exactly what's happening, he said quietly. I've spent the last hour reviewing our company finances. Care to explain the $60,000 transferred to Reed's campaign fund? Money we don't have. The remaining color drained from Hazel's face. Axel reached for his water glass, his hand visibly shaking. This is ridiculous, he blustered. A simple misunderstanding. If we could just... Mr. Reed, Harrison interrupted smoothly, I'm going to have to ask you and Ms. Montgomery to remain seated until we've resolved this situation. Axel's eyes hardened as he took in the security personnel. Are you detaining us? That's illegal. I'm an elected official and... No one's detaining you, I clarified. But since you haven't paid your bill yet, leaving would constitute theft of services. And given the potential campaign finance violations and embezzlement concerns, I thought you might prefer to discuss this privately rather than with the police. The mention of police made both of them flinch. Several diners were openly watching now, phones discreetly recording. Axel's political instincts kicked in as he realized how damaging this scene could become. "Let's be reasonable," he said, forcing a smile. "We can work this out." I slipped the bracelet onto my own wrist where it belonged. "There's nothing to work out. The restraining order my lawyer is filing tonight will keep you away from my grandmother's house, which, as her will clearly states, was left to me alone before we were married. The prenup you insisted on works both ways, Axel." His face contorted with fury before he managed to school his features. "You wouldn't dare. Think about what this will do to my campaign." "I'm sure the voters will find it fascinating," Stephen interjected. "Along with the company funds my wife apparently diverted to support it." Hazel began to cry, not the elegant tears of a wronged woman but the ugly sobbing of someone caught in their own trap. "Stephen, please. I can explain everything." "Save it for our attorneys," he replied coldly. I reached for the untouched champagne flute at their table, the same vintage I'd selected for our anniversary celebration. Raising it in a toast, I met Axel's eyes one last time. "To new beginnings," I said. "Happy anniversary, darling." I set the glass down without drinking and turned to Harrison. "Please ensure Mr. Reed and Ms. Montgomery settle their bill before leaving. Everything else is in their names: hotel charges, campaign contributions, legal consequences." As I walked away, I heard Axel calling my name, his voice stripped of its usual authority. I didn't look back. 6 months later, I stood in my kitchen, my grandmother's kitchen, preparing a private dinner for the restaurant investors who had helped me buy out Axel's share of Harvest Moon. The divorce had been finalized with surprising speed once the campaign finance investigation began. The bracelet caught the light as I chopped herbs back where it belonged. The restaurant had thrived despite, or perhaps because of, the publicity. People came initially for the gossip but returned for the food. The Chicago Tribune's glowing review had called my fall menu a revelation of resilience transformed into culinary art. Stephen had stopped by earlier with a bottle of wine and news that his company was finally recovering after Hazel's embezzlement was exposed. We'd developed an unexpected friendship, two people rebuilding their lives from similar betrayals. Nothing romantic, we were both too raw for that, but something equally valuable: mutual respect and understanding. Axel's political career had imploded spectacularly. Last I heard, he was working at his father's insurance company in Milwaukee, his campaign dreams shattered by ethics violations and public humiliation. As I prepared the table setting out my grandmother's china, I realized I was humming, something I hadn't done in years. The house felt alive again, filled with purpose and possibility rather than compromise and concealed resentments. Diamond hard, diamond bright. The Thompson women endured. We rebuilt. We thrived. And sometimes, when justice was served at just the right temperature, we even celebrated with a perfect final toast. If you enjoyed watching Melody serve justice alongside her 5-star menu, please hit subscribe and leave a comment below. What would you have done in her situation? Your support helps bring more stories of triumph to this channel.